Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with this little fairy house here. And we're going to begin by putting together just the base, just to kind of get our feet wet and start with something simple, just to kind of get in the groove. So we're going to begin by folding everything at the score marks here and getting everything prepared. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these little triangular tabs and just kind of glue them to our neighbors. So you want to make sure that you're getting that glue out to the edge, and then fold in one side and push it up against that inside part there. Okay, so get that nice and flush right there and hold it until we're sure that it's nice and set. So it should look like that. It should have a nice little edge there. And then we can move on to the next one. Get that glue out right up to the edge. And I like to kind of flatten it out with my finger so that I don't get any glue that smears. And then just make sure that you've got a nice vertical line here, that this piece on this side is matching up perfectly with this side. Hold that between your fingers until it sets, and then you can move on to the next one. Okay, so there's our next little triangular tab. And just go ahead and put some glue on there. Get it out to the edge there. Fold it in, bring that piece in. You can lift this tab out of the way so you can get your thumb in there. And just squeeze that between two fingers until it gets a nice grip. Okay, and last but not least, we've got one more here. Get our glue right on that tab. And you can actually use the nozzle to spread things around. I find that my finger is just a little more accurate. You can actually feel it. And I'm going to close that up to form the little platform or base for our little fairy house. Okay, so just squeeze that between your fingers until it sets. And this is what you should end up with here. And if you have a little area that maybe didn't take very well, you can grab what I do is I usually just put a little bit of glue on a piece of paper, and I'll grab my razor blade, just kind of dab it in there, nice and thin. You don't want too much. And just kind of go in and add a little extra glue into the little spot that you missed. Okay, and just push and hold that down until it really gets a good grip. Okay, so now that we've got that in place, you can go ahead and put the top on it. Okay, just be patient with that. Make sure that it holds. This is going to be the foundation for our house, and what good is a house without a solid foundation? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put this piece right on top. Just make sure that you have it correctly aligned because it is a little bit wider on one side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start with just one tab, and I'll get my glue in the middle there, and actually I'm going to spread that out really thin so it doesn't warp the paper. And then one little line along the edge that I'm going to also smear out, just to make sure that it's not, just to get that nice clean seam. And then you can go ahead and make sure that you've got that nice and aligned, and then push down until it's partially set. Okay, just make sure you got it nice and centered. And then you can flip it down and push down from the inside. Oops. Look at that. Kind of went askew on me. when I did that. That's okay. Luckily, this glue is it's forgiving, so I'm gonna have to try that one more time. And just based on your feedback, I'm not gonna edit that out because I want you guys to see that even if you make a mistake during the process, the end result can still be beautiful if you just take your time and learn from your mistakes. It's almost like a metaphor for life. Okay, there we go. Second time, it came out nice. Okay, so go ahead and lift this up, and I'm going to put glue on the remaining tabs. Just one little nice line of glue in the middle, and then a little thin line along the edge. Okay, I'm going to smear that out. Just like that. Lift the tabs up a little bit so as you're pushing down, you have more surface area to grab. I'm just kind of running my thumb along the edge here to clean up any glue that kind of spilled over. And just apply nice even pressure on all three of those tabs. Kind of glide your finger along there, and there is our perfect little base. Okay, so we've got our base. At this point, what we can go ahead and do is work on just kind of getting some of our panels together on the actual house. Okay, so we've got this piece here that's going to go right on top of this piece here. Okay, and as long as you follow and get the cutouts lined up, it should be perfect. Okay, go kind of sparse on the glue here, but you do want to cover as much of the area as you can just to make sure that nothing's like lifting up. Okay, and then we're also going to put some vellum down on this in just a second here. So we're kind of just doing some prep work and getting our trigger finger, as we'll call it, nice and ready for the more difficult stuff. Okay, so really all you're doing here is just making sure that the placement of this panel is accurate and doesn't obstruct any of the cutouts on the blue piece. Okay, so that's perfect. I'm just going to push that down and make sure that it has a nice hold. Give it a chance to set. I'm going to just put that off to the side. And as you can see here, I have a little bit that lifted off on the bottom. Because I don't like to cake a lot of glue on there, and sometimes I do need to go back in and fix things because I don't like to put a lot of glue on there. I notice that when I do use a lot of glue, it cakes up, it warps the paper, and it really just kind of makes it look not as pretty. So I'm just adding a little bit of glue into those areas where it's kind of lifting up, and I'm just going to push that down just to kind of fix it up really quick. Let me move this out of the way. Okay, so that is good. We'll let that set, and we can put the panel on the back of this one. Now there's no cutouts on this one to help you with alignment, so what you want to focus on is making sure that you have a nice even border all the way around. A little bit of that blue on that solid cardstock should show through equally all around this cutout. Okay, and I'm not going to make the same mistake. I'm making sure that I'm getting enough glue on the bottom of that. Okay, and just do your best to place that to where you've got a nice even border going all the way around the back of this. And that looks pretty darn good. Okay, so we'll let that set. I'm going to grab this piece, and I'm going to grab these pieces here, and we're going to get our vellum in place. And we also need the roof pieces, which are in white. That's this piece here. Okay, so let's figure out what goes where. This looks like this piece here, and then we've got these pieces here for the sides of the house. Okay, so that's where your vellum's going to go, and then we've got the roof, and we've got these pieces here. It's going to go just like that and like that. So with the vellum, just kind of get an idea of where you need to put your glue to get that to stick. And I'm just going to use my little dot method and just make sure that I cover the perimeters of all the little cutouts so that we don't have any light leaking through that area. And just make sure that you've got all the little cutouts covered. We've got some room for error there because the vellum piece is not the same size as the blue piece that I'm putting it on. So even if it's off just a tad, that's okay. Just make sure that you get that all nice in place. And that's what that should look like. So we're going to put that to the side and let that dry. And go ahead and get our vellum on this piece here. So as you can see, put that down, kind of get an idea of where the glue needs to be in order to be effective. And I'm just going to work it along the perimeter at first. Just little dots, you don't need too much. If you put too much down, you risk it smearing onto the vellum that's actually visible, and we don't want that. So that should be plenty. Okay. Just run your finger over those little dots of glue. There you go. Okay, so that's perfect. And just kind of continuing on here. Same thing with this one. If you're using AC cardstock, just make sure that you've got your texture side out. You're putting the vellum inside of the piece. There we go. And get that glued down. I know some of you might use a little tape gun or just tape that you kind of have on a roll that you peel off manually by hand, and you're more than welcome to do that. I've never really had much success using that. I do prefer the glue. It is more permanent for me. Okay, so there's this piece here. And again, just kind of get an eyeball visual of where you need to place your glue for it to be effective. Of course, you want it around the perimeter, and then just work your way up and down, and then a few horizontally should do the trick. Here we go. And if you kind of got some glue in an area where you don't need it, it's not the end of the world. That looks good. Okay. Just make sure that you don't put any glue or obstruct the little scored area here at the bottom of both of these areas, because that'll make it hard to bend and then also hard to glue the piece that's going to get glued to it. So I'm just kind of working pretty quick here. Just some random dots, just to make sure that this thing sticks nicely. Okay. All right, so all of our vellum is in place. We've got our panels in place. And at this point, we can go ahead and begin working on the structure of the little house. Okay. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to take these pieces here. And now this is a curved element, so we do need to kind of work carefully. Oops. And that's one thing you don't want to do is if you have a little thing of glue like this, you don't want to be throwing your stuff around, and that kind of goes without saying, obviously. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our sides on. And to do that, you want to begin by taking and folding everything at the score marks here. Okay, just get those folded now before we actually begin working with it. It'll just make it that much easier in the long run. Now this big tab here, that's going to be at the bottom here, okay, along with this other big tab. There's no tab on top here where it curves. Okay, so again, what we're going to do is, and what I would do is I would begin with the smallest tab here, or the tab on the bottom, I should say. We're going to start by anchoring this piece to just one tab right now. And we're going to be very patient with this piece because it's going to kind of set the tone for the rest of the construction of this. And I'm just going to take this like this, just kind of bend it and line that up so that these horizontal lines on the bottom match up. And then you can kind of get an idea of where the rest of it's going to go. Okay, so this is going to require a little bit of patience because we're kind of relying on one tab to keep it all together for us as we work up the rest of the project. So don't rush this, and definitely keep it at this angle. If you try to flatten it out, it might kind of throw it off, and you don't want to do that. So you can definitely put it down like this and push down onto your table to kind of expedite the setting process, because you're really pushing that glue into the little fibers of the paper. Okay, and that'll speed up the drying process. So I should probably wait a little bit here before I move on, because like I said, this one just really needs to stick so that the rest of it goes smoothly. So I'm going to give this another minute or so to set before I move on to the next tab. Okay, so our first tab is pretty much set. I'm going to go ahead and put glue on the next tab here, right next to it. And again, I'm going to kind of hold it this way so I can see the angle nice and clearly, so you can see it too. And just kind of keep it at the correct angle there. And just push and hold that down as well. And this one is almost as important as that first one. Once we get these first two in place, this thing will be pretty solid and pretty easy to work with, to a point where you can actually maybe, glue down 2 tabs at a time instead of just 1. Okay, so give that a few extra seconds to set. There's that second tab. And all you're doing is just making sure that as you're gluing those teeth down, you're following the natural curve of the piece. Okay, you don't want to glue it straight like this, obviously. You want to follow that curve, and it's going to require that you kind of bend the paper a little bit, which is totally fine and totally by design. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on here, and I am going to I'm going to do 2 tabs this time. Just get my glue on there. You don't need much, just a little bit. I'm going to flip it around this way and just make sure that I'm following that curve. Now I'm pushing down on the second tab. Okay, and just be patient. Try not to move this thing around too much. Let those tabs sit in place. Okay, so you can see I've got 4 of them down now. Okay, and I'm going to move on here, and I'm going to try to do 3 this time. See how that works out for me. Okay, just again, make sure that you're following that natural curve. At this point, I'm just going to put this on my table. Okay, and just kind of watch it from above here, just making sure that I'm following that angle nicely. Oops, that's good. Okay, so you can see there that I've got it nice and aligned, and that just leaves 3 more tabs here. So I'm just going to finish these off. A little bit of glue there. Okay, put that flat on my table. Again, just making sure that I'm following the natural curve of the paper, of the front of the house, I should say. I'm going to lift this up now, just take a look from the back, and that looks great. Okay, so you can see how that goes on. Okay, now just be patient with this, and just make sure you give it ample time to dry. Okay, all right, so that's looking good so far, and at this point we can go ahead and grab the other one, get everything nice and folded as far as the score marks go, and you're going to repeat that same process again on the other side. Okay, Now, if we were just making a square house, it would be less work because it would be one long tab and there's no curvature, but what fun is that when these things look really cute when they're all done. Okay. All right, so again, large tab needs to be at the bottom. I would start with the first tab at the bottom, get some glue on that. Make sure that you get that all the way out to the edge. This is going to be our little anchoring piece. It's going to ensure that this process goes nice and smooth. And again, just make sure that you're following that natural curve and that this horizontal line here matches up with this horizontal line here. And just push and hold that down until it sets. I'm going to put this down on my table and use that as leverage to kind of push this down and get it to glue faster, just set faster. Okay, so that looks good. Looks like we got that right on the head. All right, so I'm going to lift up the next two tabs here, get some glue on them. And my glue bottle is misbehaving today. I'm really mad at it. Okay, and I'm just kind of bending it and making sure that I'm lining it up properly along with that natural curve and just pushing down from the inside here, right on these tabs here, as you can see. Okay, so those are holding nicely. I'm going to go ahead and lift up the next two tabs. And you know, technically, if you wanted to, if you really want to speed up this process, what you could do, it's a little messier, but you could put glue down on the surface. You could probably just do like a nice line of glue. No one's going to see this, so it doesn't really matter. And this way, you can kind of just bend the whole thing into place. I think it's easier to work one tab at a time, but if you start getting good at this and feel confident, you can definitely just do it this way. Now you see I've got extra glue between the little tabs, but it did work and it saved me a great deal of time because I was kind of able to get them all in place. It's not as accurate, I will say that, but it is a time saver, and honestly, if you kind of squeeze things and scooch things around while the glue's setting, you can still end up with a beautiful result. And you know what, honestly, that looks fine to me. Okay, so there is 3/4 of your house, and at this point, all that's left to do is put our top on it, or the front. Okay. Okay, so we're about 3/4 of the way done here. We're going to finish this off by gluing this piece on top of this little piece here with all the little tabs. And I just had a glue disaster. It's time for a new bottle of glue because this one's kind of old and getting a little caked up at the tip. And that's just kind of what happens. Okay, so I'm going to start off by getting this bottom part glued down, trying to match up the bottom there, just making sure that these score lines kind of are on the same plane, and being patient, making sure that that gets a nice grip and a nice hold before we move on up, just to make sure that we've got a nice starting point here to get the rest of this in place. And I'm just going to hold this for a second, make sure that it really sets, and then you can kind of flip this over like this and get glue on the next set of tabs. Oops, wrong side. Work from the inside like this. Just make it easier on us. Okay, and then if you want, you can kind of put it down on your table and just kind of watch the alignments from the inside kind of push down here to add pressure to get that to stick, and then just kind of nudge the side in as you go so it conforms to that natural curve. And before we lift this up to get our next little piece of glue in place, you want to be patient and just kind of let it set so we don't risk it coming apart. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and put glue on the next set of tabs here. Just a little bit. You don't need a lot for it to stay. Okay, get your hand in there, feel for those next set of tabs, and just make sure that it conforms to that natural curve as you go up the row here. And I'm just pushing down on the tabs from the inside. Seems to be the best way to do it so that we don't risk creasing or ruining anything. So you can see here, I'm onto the next set of tabs. And that's probably a little bit too much glue. I'm going to smear a little bit of that off so it doesn't come shooting out, which it probably will a little bit. Yep. So you kind of will get the feel for it as you go as to how much glue you really need. And so far, I'm really happy with how this is progressing. Okay, so that just leaves 3 tabs there. As you can see, I've got those 3 tabs sticking up. I'm just going to go ahead and put glue on the remaining 3 here. Okay, just like that. Put it off like this, and I'm going to grab this top part here and just kind of bend it into place and just push down with my finger. Alexa, set studio to 80 degrees.
Setting studio AC to 80.
Okay, and I'm just kind of nudging this back in to help it kind of conform to that line even more. And that is a nice, perfect little seam there. Okay, so give that a few extra seconds to really set before you move on. Okay, do that. All right, and that just leaves this part here. Okay, and now this may be a little more tedious. Okay, so I'm again going to start at the bottom just to make sure that we get that nice and aligned. I'm going to try to do 2 tabs, even though I think it's probably wise just to do 1, but we'll see if we can get away with doing 2. And again, just make sure that that bottom score mark is lined up nicely, and just push that in, just like that. Just want to make sure that you're kind of following that natural curve there. And again, giving it ample time to dry. Give that a few seconds to really hold. And you can put it down on your table and push down from the inside to really help it set. Okay. And this is where closing this up is going to be a little more difficult than the rest of the process, mostly because at this point, so that we don't risk pulling anything apart, we are going to have to put our glue in from the inside. Okay, so what you're going to do is just get your next 2 tabs ready, get your glue bottle in there, work a little bit of glue onto the next set of tabs. Okay, and stick your hand in there, push down, and just try to follow that natural curve of the paper. And at this point, I'm just kind of pushing down and using the table as leverage. Okay, just let that set and put it down the other way and push down now once it's partially set. However you want to do it as far as getting this glued, I'm just sharing some tips that I've found over the years of doing this that help me get a very clean and precise outcome or result. Okay, so onto the next set of tabs here. I'm just kind of peeling them back as best as I can. Okay, and Just gonna get my glue in there. Try to show you if I can. It might be a little difficult because the light doesn't really want to travel in there very well. But let's see if you can see it. There, you can see those 2 little drops of glue in there on the next 2 tabs. And I am just gonna put that flat on my surface and just push down, just making sure that I'm following that natural curve of the piece and just wiping off any excess glue that may have spilled out. Okay, and just push that down until it sets. And that leaves us with 4 more tabs here. You can see these 4 tabs there. I'm just gonna put glue on the underside of them. I'm gonna go ahead and just do the last 4 tabs right away all together here. I think I can do that. You can use the tip of your glue bottle to kind of pull those tabs back so you can get the glue on them. Okay. And actually, I'm just going to do these 2 real quick because it's a little difficult. Okay, here we go. Just wipe off any excess glue. I'm just kind of flipping it all over the place here. Trying to find the most comfortable angle to do all this. Okay. And that just leaves me with 2 more tabs here. So again, I'm just going to take the tip of my glue, and actually, if you have a little pick-me-up tool, you can kind of use that to peel the tabs back a little bit, so it's easier to get the glue bottle in there. And just a little tiny bit of glue. And again, just making sure that you're following that natural curve so that it meets up properly. And even if it's not completely dead on, there's gonna be a roof that covers up the top part of that. Mine's off by literally like a millimeter, which is fine, because it's still gonna look great. Okay, so there we go. Got that all in place. I'm just pushing down now. And there we go. Okay, so we've got a nice little fairy village here, or fairy house, I should say. And we may as well put the bottom on just to kind of solidify this piece a little bit. So what I'm gonna do, there's 2 pieces that are just rectangles, and you wanna find there's one with a little L on it, that's your liner, that's gonna go on the inside. The one without the L is the one we're gonna put on now. And since this is the front, we're gonna put that on first because the front is always, well, it's gonna be, you're gonna see that a lot more than the sides or the back. So we wanna make sure that the front is perfect in case we make a mistake getting the rest of this glued on. It won't be as noticeable. Okay, so we'll go ahead and put that on. Get that nice and centered and lined up. When you're doing this, you kind of want it to be butted up against the little score marks that you see there. Okay, you don't want to go over them. You just want to kind of get them right on there, right next to them. And then you can flip it down onto your table and push down. Okay, there we go. And that is nice on the front there. And we can go ahead and close this up now by putting glue on the remaining tabs. And then I'm always gonna put a little bit of glue out towards the edge because I like those clean seams. And I'm sorry that I repeat that a lot, but I know a lot of you watch a lot of my videos, but some of you, this may be your first project. So I apologize for repeating myself. I just try to, whether you are brand new to Dreaming Tree or a veteran of 2 years, I kind of just like to go over everything so that can give you guys the best possible experience when you're putting this stuff together and help you succeed in making these things beautiful and perfect. So I'm just taking my dowel, I'm just kind of pushing down from the inside. If I try to stick my paw in there, I'll probably end up smashing this thing. Okay, so that looks pretty good and pretty happy with that. Okay, so there it is. And then what you want to do is get a little bit of glue on the inside here, just put it on the tabs. Actually, it doesn't really matter where it goes. It's just to help this little piece with the L on it stay in place so it doesn't pop out. Just shove that in there, and that's going to help sturdy up the bottom a little bit. Okay. All right, so that's that. Now, while we're working on this, and actually this is something I probably should have done before we put this all together, and that is putting these little decorative pieces on the actual house itself. But it's okay, it's not too late to do it now. So that is what I want to do now. We can go ahead and take this piece here and put that on the front of our house. I'm just putting little dots in the smaller areas, and then almost like little score-like runs of glue in the other areas. They kind of look like little score marks. Okay, so we're going to line that up with the cutouts. Make sure that we've got that nice and aligned all the way around, and then just push down. Okay, and give that a few seconds to set. You can kind of put that down on your surface and push from the inside to get it to really hold. Okay, so there's our cute little door. We've got an overlay that goes on top of that. We did ours in an amethyst purple. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get my glue on this. Just like that. And just cover up those, make sure that you've got it nice and aligned with the cutouts. Okay. Just like that. I'm going to put this down and push down. There we go. Let's see. Oh, that didn't want to stick. That's because we're trying to glue it to glitter. So we're probably going to have to put extra glue on this. Now, you probably don't know if you're using glitter or not for this. If you are, then I would definitely recommend putting a little thicker layer of glue onto this piece to help that stay in place. And try not to move it around too much until it sets. Okay, and we've got a little window here, or the trim for the window, and that's going to go right there. So I'm going to grab my bottle here, and I'm going to try to put tiny little dots on this piece here. And I'm running out of glue. So just little tiny dots. And let's see if I can get really precise here. I can already tell that that little area is probably going to smear out. So I'm going to clean that up when I can here in a second and just spread it out. Okay, that's fine. You don't need to cover the whole thing. As long as it's got just enough in certain areas, it'll stay nicely. Okay, there we go. Just move that around a little bit until you have it nice and centered, framing that little area perfectly. And now, see what's happening here? A little part of that door still lifting up because, again, we're working with glitter. So I'm going to usually use a razor blade. My razor blade's kind of caked right now, using the bottom of a pick-me-up tool just to kind of get a little extra glue right under there. And again, because it is glitter, you're going to need to add a little extra under there. And I went a little wild there, but just scrape that off, push down, and hold that in place for just a few extra seconds while it sets. Okay. All right, so that should do the trick. All right, so our house is almost done here. We just have to put a roof together. We've got some flowers. And actually, while we're at it here, we've got these little panels here, and that's just to kind of sturdy up the structure, add a little bit of dimension, and we're going to glue these right onto the side here. I don't think it really matters. Looks like these are symmetrical, so whichever way you want to do it is fine. So let's go ahead and get that on there. I'd work the perimeter first. And then a little bit of glue on the X's, and just make sure that you match that up nicely. Okay, a little bit of glue there. That's okay, because that's going to be covered up by the roof, and eventually it kind of dries clear, so it's not the end of the world. There we go. Yeah, the roof will definitely cover that up, and it'll give it a little character. Okay, so that looks good. Let's flip it over and get the other one down. Okay, and there we go. Scooch it up just a tiny bit. And now again, I'm seeing another little issue here where that didn't stick very well. So I'm just grab my pick-me-up tool, get a little glue on the tip of that. Again, I like the razor blade because it's a lot thinner. And then just push that down and hold it until it really sets. And you see the difference there. There we go. Okay, so that's pretty much done. What we can do at this point is we can actually put this on our base just to give this thing ample time to dry. And what we want to do is you want to kind of figure out, it's actually the long way is going to be going this way. So you don't want it like this. You want more room up at the front because we are going to put a little step on here. And what you want to do is kind of get a visual and center this so that this little walkway or little border is equal on the two sides and the back of the house, and the front is going to be a little bit wider and longer. So I'm going to go ahead and put a nice line of glue on here. And again, make sure that you've got a nice even border all the way around. Okay, and just push and hold that down for a second. Maybe grab a dowel and just kind of push down there. You don't want to push too hard because you don't want to bend or bow the platform. You just want enough to where you know it's going to hold nicely. Okay, so we've got that on our platform, and at this point we can go ahead and begin working on our roof. Okay, and then all we have after that is a quick little flower and some dragonflies that we're going to put on some wire just to kind of jazz this piece up already. But you can see where this is going, and it's looking great so far. And again, you saw all the little mistakes I made along the way, but I think this looks pretty darn perfect. So let's put that aside and let's take a look at our roof here. Okay, we've already got the vellum on the roof. Let's go ahead and make sure that we get everything scored here. And what we want to do is, actually, we're going to go ahead and put the sides together first to form the shape of this thing. And then we can go ahead and put the little panels on the roof and the little shingles. And before you know it, we'll be all done here. Okay, so we have our roof here, and we've got these two little pieces. They are both symmetrical, so it doesn't matter which one you grab. What we want to do is take and fold everything at the score marks, and we're going to go ahead and begin gluing this to the roof. And that's going to give us a little surface on the front to put our little panel that we've cut out of glitter, and it's going to help stabilize the structure. So you can use this as just a decorative luminary or a little gift box. And you can put a nice little tea light inside of there, or like the little lights that we use, which are the color changing LEDs. So anyway, the way that this works is you're going to put this on like this, and the tabs are actually going to glue to the outside. So that kind of just makes life easier. Okay, and we want to make sure that we scooch this down and get it in place. So I'm going to begin by taking and putting glue on just this first little tab here, this little triangular tab, and I'm going to position it on here so that the little tip of this front piece is lined up perfectly. Okay, now this roof does kind of curve out just a tad, and as you work your way down, it will kind of take its shape properly. And what I'm also going to do is I am going to glue the other side, this other small tab at the top, just to kind of hold this in place so it doesn't move around as far as the top goes. We want that to be nice and centered. So I'm just kind of squeezing these two top little tabs, keeping everything in place, and then we'll work our way down. We'll work our way down here, a few tabs at a time. Okay, so that looks good. I'm gonna flip over a couple tabs. And you know, for the sake of saving some time, if you want, you can kind of just take your glue, because we're gonna be covering this up, so it doesn't have to be perfect. If you wanna just take and create a little line of glue right along the edge there, and then it's gonna be a little messy, but it will make the work a lot quicker. Okay, you can kind of just push these down like that. So I'm using this finger here to push out from the inside, and then I'm using this finger here to push in. And I'm not overly concerned about the glue smearing out because this is all going to be covered up. So you see how much faster that went. I just did, you know, 4 tabs or 5 tabs pretty quickly. Okay, so that's just going to speed up the work. It is going to get a little messier. I mean, you could be a little more careful, I guess. And there's just so many different ways of doing this. I'm just showing you what I think is probably the most efficient way. Okay, so again, just kind of pushing like that. Just making sure that you keep that lined up. And this is exactly why it's probably easier just to do a few tabs at a time so that you're really focusing your attention on a few tabs rather than a bunch of tabs. And then, you know, if you try to do too many, it's possible that none of them will stick because you're not giving each one the attention that it needs. So I'm going to go back to the individual method. I think those 5 tabs that I just did in a row like that, that was probably just luck. Or I had a eye of the tiger moment there where I was a black belt in crafting, but it's not always going to work that way. So I'm just getting these last 2 tabs in place. My thumb fits over them, so I can apply pressure like that. And then this last piece here, this tab here, it's going to kind of curve in just a tad, and you're going to actually glue this part to the inside. Okay, because then we're going to put a nice little decorative piece right here to clean that off, or close that off, I should say. Okay, so let's move this out of the way for a second, and let's get a little bit of glue on that tab. And my glue bottle is just wreaking havoc on me today, but I'm just working with it anyway. Okay, so we'll get that glued. There we go, just kind of squeezing that to my fingers. Make sure that you've got that nice and aligned. You've got a few seconds here to kind of smooth it out and flatten it out and make sure that it's nice and aligned. And then we're just going to follow up and do the same thing on this side here. Okay, so I'm going to lift up like 3 tabs here, maybe just 2, just to be consistent here. And again, just make sure that you're kind of following that curve. So my hand inside is pushing out, kind of pushing out, and then I'm pushing down with this finger to get those tabs in place. Okay, so you see how that works. All right, just be patient, give it a few seconds to set before you move on. I'm going to bring up the next 2 tabs you can see there, right behind, in front of my finger. And get those glued into place. Again, just kind of pushing from the inside, pushing in from the outside. Kind of create a little sandwich effect there. My fingers being the bread. Okay, grab the next two. You can see them there. Okay, and just make sure that kind of following that natural curve too. May not seem like you're doing much, but as long as you get that glued flush, it will naturally begin to curve in the direction that we designed it. So it's kind of magical the way that works. Okay, so you see those two tabs there up against the gray on my little cutting board, cutting mat. Okay, and I'm just going to push those up against there. Got a little extra glue on there, but again, this is going to be covered up, so if there was ever a time to be sloppy, this is it. Okay, so let's just finish this off with these last three tabs there. Hopefully you can see them. There they are. And just a little dot of glue should do the trick. And just kind of push that up against the paper there and get this tab in. There we go. Okay, that looks good. Now be patient while that dries. And you can't put this flat on your table because it is kind of at an angle. And if you do that, it might ruin it. So you kind of got to do it up like this. There's just no way around it, unfortunately. Okay, and that just leaves this little tab here, right there, to close this little piece up. Okay, there we go. And just squeeze and hold for just a few seconds while that sets. And we've got our cute little scalloped trim for our roof all together. And yay, we get to do it one more time on the back. Okay, so again, this time should be a little bit easier because we already have it somewhat formed. Okay, I'll walk you through it. So we're gonna fold all the score marks, or fold all the tabs over at the score marks. Okay, and then we got this one here, that's the bottom. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this in place. And just like we did with the first side, I'm going to put glue on the first two tabs on either side, on both sides I should say, at the top, just to kind of get it anchored in place. So I'm just going to hold it on both sides here for a few seconds just to let that dry. Okay, and then since this thing is already mostly formed, I think we can probably get away with doing more tabs in one fell swoop here, just to kind of speed things up here a little bit. Okay, yeah, that looks good. So I'm going to flip over like 4 tabs here. And I think the secret to this is just using very little glue on there so that it just dries quicker. Okay, just like a quick like 1-2 punch. Glue, press, and then just move on. Yeah, so you see that. Sometimes when you have too much glue, it doesn't set right away, but when you have a little less, it tends to absorb in and bond and just set so much quicker. So, you know, if you're having trouble with paper crafting, I'd say the number one thing to do is just make sure that you're not using too much glue. It doesn't take much for it to really stick. So just follow along here, do your best, and as time goes on and you work on more complicated projects, you'll kind of come into your form and learn from your mistakes, and I bet you're going to be an awesome paper crafter. And let me move this out of the way. Gotta clean my glue bottle tip here. Okay, so again, just very easy on the glue on these tabs. They're really small, they don't need a lot, just a tiny little bit. And just 1-2 and push, and it should stick. Just make sure that you've got that nicely aligned with the edge of that roof. And now as we start to kind of curve more, might need to slow down a little bit and do these more individually. Okay, so I have 2 left here. Actually, I think I just have 1. I don't remember if I put glue on that one or not. Okay, so let's get that last one anchored, and then we can go ahead and glue that bottom piece in place. Get that nice and aligned. There we go. All right, and then we're just gonna put some glue on this last little tab there. Okay, and flip that on the inside. Just make sure that it's nice and lined up. So you've got a nice straight line there. And voila. Okay, so just go over to the other side and grab a few tabs. I'm gonna go with the 4 here. Just go really easy on the glue. Put that on your surface there. And grab a finger on the inside there and just squeeze those into place. Press them into place, I should say. There we go. I can already tell that this one needs a little more TLC. Okay. All right, let's grab a few more tabs here and finish this up. Just gonna put some glue on there. Okay. And just push nice and gently. Nice and gentle. Okay, just make sure that you've got it sitting on the ledge of that roof part, the main part. Okay, and see that one's glued down. So I've got 3 left here, and then that bottom one. Okay, so I'm just going to put glue on these last 3 little tabs, and the glue kind of came out forcefully that time. Got a little bit too much on there, but that's okay. Again, this is going to be covered up with all of our little shingles and stuff, so if you have a little extra glue on there, no big deal. Okay, so that's all in place, and we can peel this back, get a little bit of glue on this last piece here, tuck it back under, and get it glued to the inside of that. And there we go. Okay, so a little tedious, but totally worth it because it's going to hold really nicely. It's going to be beautiful and perfect, and you can't ask for more. So now that we have that in place, what we want to go ahead and do is put our little decorative pieces on here. Okay, and there's 2 of them. They're both symmetrical, so it doesn't really matter which side you put it on. I'm going to go ahead and put glue along this entire little piece here. Okay, try to get some glue out to the little scalloped parts here, and then also just make sure that you get the glue out to the edge as well. And I'm going to smear that just to flatten it out a little bit. It'll speed up the setting process for me. Okay, and I'm just going to pop that on there, lining it up as nicely as possible, just like that, just like that, and just kind of squeeze that between your fingers. Make sure you've got it nice and aligned. That looks perfect. I'm going to put this down so I can push from the inside, and if you want to get a dowel or something to help you with extra leverage and pressure or force, that's fine too. Whatever makes your job easier. Okay, that looks great. Looks like it's perfectly lined up there. I'm going to repeat the same thing on the other side here. Okay, I'll smear that flat so it sets quicker. And just like that. Make sure you've got it nice and aligned. The roof still is kind of this is what ultimately will keep that roof really in the shape that we want it. And this is that little piece that's really gonna make it permanent. So just make sure that you do your best to get that nicely aligned. Okay, so that looks good. Okay, great. So our roof is pretty much together here, minus the shingles, which we're gonna do next. And actually, before we do that, we can go ahead and put our little trim pieces here on the side. Okay, so let's go ahead and get a little glue on this part here. And I'm going to smear that flat. Grab this piece and just pop it right on there. It's all about the little details. So take your time and make it pretty. And now I got glitter all over me. I love glitter, said nobody ever when it's all over your house. Okay. All right. And it looks like I missed a little spot here. Okay. Get that in place. Just kind of squeeze it a little bit. Make sure that it's flush with the bottom. Nice and even. Okay. There we go. All right. So that just leaves the roof and as far as the shingles go. So kind of, I think we went through this, I'm not sure, but we'll go through it again here. And what you want to do, since the roof is symmetrical, you want to kind of line out or lay out your pieces like this. This is the biggest piece here. Each one's going to have one of those. Each one's going to have a piece like this that doesn't have any holes in it. When you cut this out, it'll probably be lined up for you. But if you happen to peel these off the mat before you get a chance to realize that they are in a certain order, what you want to do is just kind of look through these and find the ones that are the exact same size and put one on each side. Okay, so that's probably the best way I can explain what we're doing here. Just kind of making sure that they're both the same size, and then I'm putting one on each side here. Okay, that looks good. And then we've got, I think, this one here. Yep. So one on each side, and then this is the last one. It's the largest one, just like that. Okay, so what's going to happen is the larger ones are going to go near the bottom, and they get shorter as you go up. Okay, so that's kind of how it's going to look. And then this is the first piece that goes on, and that we're going to, basically the alignment on this is just making sure that we've got all the holes covered up. Okay, and what we do want to do is we want to take this piece before we put it on the roof. I've got a 3/8 inch dowel, and I'm going to take this and I'm just going to curl the end of this on my dowel and just hold it for a second just to kind of give it that look. Okay, we want to give this thing a little bit of pop. All right, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to take this and glue it down. And make sure that we get the glue out to the edge. You don't need to put it on the curved part because that is just going to be sort of suspended in midair. So we don't need to put glue on that. And really, again, what you're doing here is just making sure that you've got the holes aligned. As long as you've got the holes aligned and you can see clear through it, you know you've got it right. Oops. Okay, so just do your best to get that nice and aligned. Kind of squeeze from the inside to make sure that all that adheres. Okay. And what you could do, if you want, is instead of putting glue on the actual piece, you can put glue here, which would actually probably be more accurate. Okay. Like that. And I do need to curl this really quick before that glue sets too much. Okay, so I'm just holding it for a few seconds just to kind of give it a curl. And again, just make sure that you got those holes nice and lined up so you can see right through them. You shouldn't have any of that white showing through. Here we go. Okay, and then just kind of squeeze in there. And if you get a little bit of glue on this, it's not the end of the world, but this top should pretty much meet perfectly. Okay, I think I've got it off just a tad. I'm gonna squeeze it over just a little bit. Perfect. Okay, great. And then at this point, what we're gonna do is we're gonna work our way from the bottom up. Okay, so you want the largest piece here on either side. We'll start on one side and then do the other side. So I'm grabbing the largest piece and I am gonna curl the bottom here. Okay, so I'm just kind of curling it around my dowel, releasing it, and you only need to put glue on pretty much like the top part of this. You don't need to put anything beyond the circles, just like that. We're gonna skip the bottom section of holes and we're gonna cover up the next section above that, just like that. Okay, you can kind of squeeze that between your fingers. All right, and we can move on to the next piece. And I'm gonna curl that as well. And just curl it and let it really hold. Here we go. And just put a little bit of glue on there. And then we're gonna cover up the next set of holes. Just like that. Make sure you can see clear through there. And the reason we're doing that is just to kind of let light leak out of there to really illuminate this thing, to make it look really cool. Okay, so then we're gonna do the same thing again, all the way up the line here. Gotta curl this little shingle, get some glue on this, just like that. And next one, there we go. Just make sure that you've got it aligned properly on the holes. And if you get a little glue that smears out, it's okay, because the next layer is going to cover that up nicely. So, not the end of the world if you get a little bit of leakage there. Okay. All right, so next one here, I'm going to curl this like that. Get a little bit of glue. Like I said, just don't go beyond the holes. There's no point. You just want to kind of make sure we get enough glue on there, but we don't need to put glue in areas that don't need it. Okay, just like that. All right, so that leaves two more. I'm gonna curl this. I'm using these fingers here to try to hold this paper down so I kind of curl it evenly. Okay, so this one here is gonna go right on the top row of little cutouts. Just like that. And that just leaves this little piece here that doesn't have any cutouts, and this one we do also want to roll to kind of lift it up. Give it that look. I'm going to roll it around as far as I can without it popping out. There we go. And just want a little bit of glue right at the edge there. And I'm going to smear this out so I don't get any leakage. And we're going to pop that right flush with the top. Just like that. And you can probably use a dowel to kind of push up against that and make sure that we're getting even pressure along this whole thing so that it really stays and looks nice. Okay, so there you go. We got our shingles on one side, and that looks fabulous. Okay, so you're just going to repeat that same process on the other side here. So here's what I'm going to do this time. I'm going to get into a assembly line here. And I'm going to get all these well, actually, you know what? I'm going to keep them like that because I don't want to lose my spot. I want to make sure that I get all this accurate and I don't mix it up. I feel like maybe if I do that, I'm going to lose track of what's what. All right, so we're skipping the first row here and we're going straight to the second row since we already have that bottom shingle on there. Okay. And again, just use the holes as a guide. That is going to guide you. All right, we'll grab the next one here. I'm going to curl it. Again, this is a 3/8 inch dowel, and that is what's helping me achieve that nice curved look. Okay, that should be enough. And we're going to the row above that one, just like that. Okay, so you see that there. And we are almost done with this roof. The last part's pretty fun. So let's roll that. Okay. There we go. Get that in place. Just follow the little cutouts. And then you can also, oops, you can also kind of run your finger along the edge here just to make sure that you've got that nice and aligned horizontally as well. Just to check your work as you go. Okay, so that leaves this guy here. One more after that, and then the top part, and we are done with our roof. We can kind of see what this thing's going to look like. I bet it looks really cute. I know I've got a little 3-year-old in my life that is probably going to want to use these for calico critters. And don't know if I'll be able to part with them, but I may have no choice. All right, so last one here, just kind of rolling that. No, it's not the last one, almost the last one. And get our glue on there. Okay, that's going right. Ooh, got a little too much glue there. Okay, that's going on the last row there. Just like that. All right. And last but not least, our little top part here. I'm gonna roll that as far as I can go, just to really make it do its thing. Okay, great. And again, just a little line of glue at the top. I'm going to smear that out to the edge as close as possible and line that up nicely with the top. Make sure it's nice and centered. There's no holes for alignment there, so just make sure that you've got a nice rooftop and it's nice and solid. I'm going to use my dowel to kind of apply even pressure along this whole thing. And there we go. We've got a beautiful little roof. Let's take a look at what that looks like on the actual house. Isn't that cute? Look how cute that is. Okay. All right, so we are pretty much done with this thing. There's a little door stop that we need to put together, which is actually pretty simple. And that's this piece here. Okay. And just want to go ahead and fold everything at the score marks. Okay, and there's a few small ones here. This one's kind of a little tedious, tiny little tedious treasure, but we won't have a problem putting it together. Should be just fine. Okay, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna glue. Actually, what we can do is we can glue these tabs on the bottom like this, okay? And that's just gonna make for an easier assembly, okay? So we're gonna do that, but first we're gonna actually take this tab here and glue it to the inside of itself, okay? So let's do that. Oops. Let's get these teeth on the outside here just to make our lives easier. And get that inside. Stick your finger in there and just kind of hold that in place until it dries. So on one side, we're going to put the teeth on the outside just to kind of shape it. On the other side, we'll put the teeth inside. We're just literally going to close the lid, I guess you can say. Okay, so give that a few seconds to dry. Now flip these teeth up, okay, And what I'm going to do is I am just going to put a line of glue, really thin line of glue, on the surface there. This is going to be glued down anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Okay, and stick your finger in through the bottom, which will actually end up being the top, and just push those tabs down to close this up. And yeah, it's going to get a little messy. Just keep the mess on the bottom and on the back, which are not going to be visible. Just make sure this part and this part are nice and clear of any glue. And just push those down. And once you've got a semi-hold on it, like that, will be good. And we can actually put this down on our surface and use a little dowel to really get that to stick. Okay, so that looks good. And now we can take these tabs and push them down. Okay, and we're going to put glue on all of these little tabs. Going to be kind of careful. It's a very delicate, small piece. And I am actually going to put a little more on there because I'm going to smear this with my finger out to the edge. And then you can close this up. And as you're closing it, and as you're allowing it to set, you kind of want to run your finger along the edge. Just make sure that you're kind of following that natural curve. And when I do this, as I kind of run my finger up against it, it does kind of nudge it into place and where it should be. So now I've got it formed. I'm just going to hold it between my fingers for a few extra seconds just to make sure that it sets properly. Okay, so that looks cute. And then what we're going to do is we are going to put that right here. It's going to be our little doorstep. Okay. All right, so I think it's pretty much dry at this point, so we can go ahead and put our glue on the bottom of this and get it out to the edge so that it looks nice and seamless from the outside. Got to make a good first impression when you visit the fairy house. All right, there we go. Pop that right in place. There's our little doorstep. Okay, so let that set. And at this point, we just have some flowers to make here. All right, so let's wrap this up here. And to do that, I'm gonna grab my little dragonflies here, and we're gonna sandwich these two pieces on a little wire so that we can adhere them to our house, and it's going to look really cute. So let me grab the house here. I kind of want them dangling right about here, so I'd say this is probably enough wire. I'll give you the exact measurement here in a second after I cut it. Say about 7 inches, and we want one of them to be a little bit taller, so let's go about 8.5. Okay, and what we're going to do, we're going to flip these over. So we've got the texture side facing us right now, and we're going to pop our wire right in the center of these guys here, and we're going to take this little body, this black part, and glue that right on top like that. So I'm going to grab my glue. You can use a hot glue gun if you want. I think as long as the paper sticks, should be just fine. Just make sure you get that nice and sandwiched in the middle, and you can kind of almost like pinch it shut. And we're going to want to leave this to dry so that it really gets a good hold. And it might take a little bit to really stick, so do your best to get that in place. Okay. Just like that. Now, if you don't want to put these on a wire, you can just glue the black part to your colored part and just kind of glue them to the roof or whatever you want to do. It's completely up to you. And I've got a little part here that I missed. So I'm going to grab my little razor blade and just get a little extra glue right on his nose. And that should do it. I'll close that up. The little black parts that stick out are like his eyeballs, basically. So you want to make sure you get that lined up correctly. Okay, so that's already starting to kind of grip and hold, but I want to be very patient with this so it doesn't come undone. The wings are going to kind of go up like that. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with this one here. Now with this one, and you may want to use a thinner gauge wire. And when you do put this down, maybe don't get it all the way up to his head. Just focus on the body. Okay, I'm going to curl this a little bit so it sits more flat on my table here. There we go, just like that. And I'm just going to squeeze some glue out. I'm putting it on the wire, but basically what's going to happen is when we put this piece on there, it's going to take that and smudge it and kind of push it down onto the paper. As long as we get the majority of this to grip, that's all we really need. Just really just pressing down, and it's kind of, you can actually see the shape of the wire there as I push that down, and that's really what we're looking for. See if you can see that. And it's a little hard to see. There we go, you can kind of see that there. Okay, and that looks good to me. So we'll just kind of wait for this to really set before we play with it. Okay, so we can go ahead and put our little flower together, and we've got this main piece here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and pinch these leaves just to kind of give them a little bit of dimension, and do your best to kind of pinch them right at the tips. If you don't get it right at the tip, it's not a big deal. You're not going to really be able to tell the difference too much. You just want to kind of crease it a little bit so that when the light hits it, it kind of makes it a little more interesting, just like that. Okay, and we have these two little leaf. Then we have these two little leaves. You also want to go ahead and pinch those. Okay. And I'm going to pinch them like that. And that's going to go right here. And we want to actually flare this out a little bit too, and then pinch it, just to kind of cup it a little bit. And then we're just going to put a little dot of glue right at the base here. And it's basically a silhouette of this part here, so just kind of get it right in that little, right in that area, right in the ballpark. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing with this one here. We're going to go ahead and pinch this, kind of cup it a little bit so that it kind of flares out. Just want to give this piece some good dimension. And we're going to glue that piece right here. Okay, so we've got that in place. All right, now we also have some tendrils here, and we're going to take those and just kind of curl them around a dowel, and just curl them nice and tight around the dowel, just to kind of shape them and make them curly. Okay, and just hold them nice and tight around your dowel and kind of squeeze them and like make it really taut, and then kind of pull it out. Okay. And the idea with this is it's going to be going up the project, kind of like that. Okay, so we want some tendrils to kind of be sticking up and out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a pop dot. I'm going to pop dot that on there. And it's really up to you where you want to put it. I'm going to put it right about there. Okay, the flower is going to be covering this up, so it doesn't really matter if it's a little messy, but you kind of get the idea. We want that to kind of flare out like that. So we'll go ahead and curl these other two and just kind of position them wherever. Okay, we want one kind of sticking up, maybe a couple of them will be sticking out to the side. That's really up to you. You can leave that completely up to you. Okay, now pull that apart a little bit. And again, let's have one. Actually, we're going to put these on the back. So I'm going to grab a pop dot and put one on the back here. Okay, and again, it's going to look kind of like that. Oops. Like that. So we're going to have this one kind of coming out this way, like that. And then we'll get this last one here, nice and curled, and we'll have it coming out the other way. So we've got one kind of coming out of every little direction here. Okay, and that one, I kind of didn't like how that turned out, so I'm going to do that one more time, and I'm going to pull that really tight and wrap it around and squeeze it up against that dowel and pull it out just like that. Okay, and then this one again is going to be coming out like this way. So you get the idea here. It's going to kind of look like that. Okay, and that just leaves our little flower here. So what we're going to do is we got these 4 pieces here. Let me move this out of the way for a second. I'm going to grab my dowel, okay, this layer here. I'm going to go ahead and curl these and train them, kind of flare them out, kind of make them a little interesting, and then maybe just like peel some of the petals back and some of the petals forth, or the sections of the petals, I should say, just to kind of give this thing some life and make it really random. I'm going to kind of cup it in a little bit. I'm going to grab my pink one and do the same thing. Just kind of train it along the dowel there. And I'm going to have that one coming in at an angle. Maybe just kind of curl this part back a little. And maybe that one back a little. This one in. Okay, this one's going to be pretty standard. I'm going to cup that in. And I'm just going to put a little dot of glue in the center here. And I'm going to offset this just like that. Get that glued just like that. Okay. Move that out of the way. All right. So we also have this little centerpiece, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pop dot that, because I want to make it kind of interesting. And I gotta kind of break apart a pop dot because the pop dot's a little bit too big. So we'll just get that on there and pop that right in the center. Okay, so there's our little flower, which just leaves our little stamen piece here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and wrap it around. I'm going to wrap it around this dowel. And actually this dowel is a little bit too thick. I want something smaller. Maybe a skewer would actually work better. So, okay, so I've got my little skewer here, and I'm going to take this part here and just kind of wrap it around the skewer nice and tight, and then we're just going to glue that to itself Now you can use some Scotch tape if you want, if you need it to help you get that initial hold, but I think I've been making these long enough to where I'm confident that I don't need that. So just kind of hold that until it's dry. Okay, you can peel it off. And then if you want to use glue, you can. I think I'm just going to put a little dot of hot glue on the bottom of this thing, just so that I'm sure it'll set nicely and quickly for me. Okay, and hot glue, always a little messy, the little strings that it leaves behind, but I can just peel those off. Okay, just like that. Give that a second to set, and then what we'll do is we'll kind of flare those out once we know that it's completely set, and the flower is going to go right on that little pop dot. Okay, so let's get that stuck on there, and then we can go ahead and flare the little stamen out. I think that hot glue is pretty much set for the most part. Just gonna flare those out, make the flower more interesting. Okay, and I can kind of cup the petals in a little bit more. Okay, so there's our little floral piece. Okay, so before we put our flower on, probably gonna want to take and glue our little dragonflies in place here. Now, if you want, you can probably just puncture a little hole into this just to kind of help anchor it that way. And then take your hot glue gun and just pretty much just glue it to the side of the building. Now, this is completely optional. You don't have to do this, and just remember, if you kind of make a little bit of a mess there, it's not the end of the world because your flower is going to be covering that up. So I'm just kind of taking my glue and smearing it over the little wire there, just to make sure that it's covered nicely. And I'm going to hold that until it really sets, and then we can kind of just hold it there and bend this back until it's sitting the way we want it to sit. So just be patient while that dries, so that it gets a permanent hold. Okay, and then we can go ahead and get the other one in place as well. And that looks like it's almost set. So I'm going to grab my other one, and I'll probably just bring it on the inside and kind of pop a hole in there too with the wire, just like that. Okay, and grab my glue gun and just glue that to the base and a little bit to the side of the building as well. And again, don't worry about making a mess on that, because we're going to cover that up with our flowers, and ow, that hurts. Okay, let's give that a little extra time here to really set before we move on. Okay, and once your little dragonflies are all set, you can go ahead and just pop your flower on there. I've got a pop dot on the back of it, so it's really going to hold everything in place. And then you can kind of finesse the little petals, make them nice and pretty. And then if you need to, you can go ahead and adjust the location of your dragonflies. I'm not going to do that just yet. I want to give that hot glue a little more time to really set before I start messing with the wires. But there is our little dragonfly fairy house.
Stay on top of all things Dreaming Tree and engage with us today. Get the latest news and enter in our giveaways on Facebook. Get inspired by following us on Pinterest. Be the first to see our new product launches on Instagram. Do you prefer Twitter? Yep, we're there too. Watch our beautiful product trailers and assembly tutorials on YouTube. For more information, visit www.3dsvg.com. Live, craft, love, and dream.